And I think, you know, we just have to, in society, not just look out for the people that can do for us, but look out for those who are overlooked.
Good afternoon. I'm Michele Norris, and I am so honored to introduce our first guest this afternoon. You will know him as an Academy Award, Golden Globe, Emmy, and Grammy Award winner. He's also the founder of the criminal justice reform nonprofit called Imagine Justice. I'm talking about the artist, actor, author, and activist who goes by one name, and that one name is Common. So glad to have you with us today.
Peace, Michelle. Thank you for having me. Great day to you.
You too, you too. Good to be seen. And good to be here to talk about such an important topic. How did you get so closely involved in prison reform? It's so close to your heart. You spend so much time on this issue. How did that happen?
Well, I was initially just really and still am concerned with our inner city and our youth and what's going on with them. And I really have been working on programs to change the situations for young people in the inner city, to create programs and things that would benefit them. Um, I was doing a documentary and I had a conversation with Michelle Alexander, who wrote the book, The New Jim Crow. And this is a phenomenal book which ties, you know, how from slavery to the Reconstruction era to Jim Crow and now mass incarceration has been a way to keep black people as second class citizens. It's a new form of slavery in many ways. We look at the prison system, and when she broke down to me in our conversation how it was really affecting people outside of prison too, it really struck a light in me. It struck a nerve, and I had been rapping about situations dealing with prison, like the song I did for Ava DuVernay's film 13th, but I hadn't been as active as I should be. And you know, when that spark went off, I I met Scott Budnick, who was this incredible human being who would consistently come to me and said, "Hey, you should come to some of these retreats that we have with formerly incarcerated people, just and support some of these youth groups." But my heart wasn't there yet. But after this conversation and really understanding how much we overlook our incarcerated people, I just connected with Scott, and from there it's been full on, like just committing to really changing this criminal justice system, going into prisons. We went to so many prisons in California, meeting women and men, and just really actually doing things to get the laws changed, which we've accomplished also. So I mean, I'm really passionate about this. I feel like the way our society looks at those who are overlooked, or the way we treat those in prison, is the way we actually treating ourselves. And I think it's important that we know that people incarcerated are affecting our lives too, and they are human beings also.
You know, I wish Michelle Alexander was watching this today because she would love to know that you had an epiphany based on her book, The New Jim Crow. Books can change lives. And you've talked about how you are changing laws through your work, actually becoming proximate to people who have been sent away from the rest of society and making sure that we don't forget about them and that we don't forget about the conditions that they live under. You've had a particular focus on juvenile justice. Can you tell us why that is so important?
Well, I mean, I just think like I when you're young and you are in a difficult situation, it's hard to make good choices. It's hard for us as adults sometimes. And I look at what the criminal justice system has done to young people. Like I met people who were incarcerated when they were like 15 and 16, and they were doing life without parole for some crimes that weren't violent. And even the ones that were, it's like when I thought about like the way I thought as a teenager, and some of the choices that I made that weren't good decisions. I looked and said, man, we have to like give our young people better opportunities to live and correct themselves and be forgiven. And human beings in general. That's what this country was, that's one of the things that it was sold on, is like this a country that does deal with a forgiveness and a second chance. So for me, I just was, I seen people that could be my children in prison and being treated like less than human beings. And I just can't help but think about really creating opportunities for them. Because for me, the reason why I was able to pursue my goals and dreams is because I saw some value in myself. And that's really what we want to do with those young people who are incarcerated, and actually everybody, woman and man, that's incarcerated. We want them to know they are valued and they are loved. So that's what's taking place. I've met some incredible young individuals, great writers, great thinkers, talented young men, who really like could come out to society and really contribute. So I really believe that our criminal justice system has to be one of healing, has to be one of reform and redemption. So that's why I've been focusing on our young people.
I want to bring in a question from an audience member. His name is Lee McAuliffe. He lives in Florida, and he's interested in the juvenile justice system and wants to know about the challenges and needs that they face and how that's different from incarcerated adults. The difference in needs in terms of what adults need and what children need. I'm going to add to his question and also include women in that also, and how the question of whether their needs are different, both in terms of living behind bars and also when they integrate back into society.
Well, I think with young people, like what I've noticed is that they need ways of expression, to like, whether it's art programs, they need like academic programs, they need mental health and wellness programs. um, I'm an advocate for everything from meditation to yoga and I love this spirituality. I've met some great like spiritual leaders who've been in prisons and really helped turn people's lives around. So I feel that from my observation, the young people have have needed to know that they can have that access to those things, and those things start building their self-esteem and their self-worth. Um, I feel, to be honest, a lot of it is similar with women too. Like the women, obviously, in certain ways, also need what I've experienced with the women that I've met in prison who were incarcerated, that they needed like their families to come and show up. I talked to a lot of women whose children eventually didn't, you know, come to see them. So I guess to translate that into what we can do, we have to humanize the person incarcerated. And women have to be, and we have to make sure that when we talk about criminal justice and changing the system, that we don't leave women out of this equation, and really pay attention to their needs, which a lot of it definitely does also have to do with therapy. Like I've sat in sessions in men's prisons, women's prisons, and juvenile locations where, and each one, some of the most beneficial things I've seen was just sitting in a circle with therapists and with individuals and everybody just opening up. I feel that the women also need that. And those are some of the things that's been most important. And programs, like programs that deal with creativity, art, finding a trade. I've met, shout out to Charles Alexander, who I met an individual who, when I first prison I went into, he was coding, and this guy had been through a lot, abuse and everything. Eventually, he learned coding in prison. Eventually, now he's out of prison and working um, in the tech world, and I'm very proud of him. And my point is, he was given, and he came in as a youth, but he was given something that he could value, that's something that he could pursue. The same way our kids need it in our environments in the inner cities, is they need to know, like, hey, I can do something with myself. I have a dream, or let's introduce them to new things, to like, whether it may be dealing with architect, like engineering, coding, all those things, especially knowing that we know how the tech world is valuable out there now, it's like we got to give that to those that are incarcerated also.
How important is it for people who are incarcerated to remain connected to the outside world? If you have a family member, a community member, a loved one in prison, it's hard to maintain that connection. It's hard sometimes to get to the prison. Visiting hours are limited. I don't know if you ever heard of Marcus Bullock and the app that he created called Flickshop, which allows people to easily send letters or postcards. I mean, how important is that kind of thing? So you know that someone is out there thinking about you and perhaps waiting to help you when when you return to your community.
Michelle, I believe that's one of the most significant things that is needed for those who are incarcerated. As I just spoke about with the women, they needed to know, but men and women needed to know that they were cared about, from family members, reaching out to them, to friends and loved ones. And I have to acknowledge myself. I had a cousin who was incarcerated, and I was going to prisons to visit people who I didn't know and going to like encourage them. And I hadn't visited my cousin, and made me look at myself in the mirror and say, why haven't I? Why haven't I made that effort? And I think it's something that we as people who are in the free world and in society really have to dig deep and think about how do we go beyond just our comfort levels, go and as you said, get proximate, as the great Brian Stevenson uses that word very much. Go get proximate with individuals who are incarcerated. Me going to the prisons let me see that these individuals I met, people who had committed murder, were still a human being, and they deserve the chance for redemption and forgiveness. And I've met many people who, for me, have been some of the most intelligent, most enlightened people who had also been serving life sentences for murder. And I just, it made me understand that, like, if we can just reach out to them, we can heal. And part of healing this country is healing those that are incarcerated. And if we reach out to them, just extend our hands towards those individuals, it's so necessary for them. Anybody that has a family member, friend, and you forgot about them and you haven't made time, please take time when the opportunity is there to go and support them. And that's one of the biggest things that I remember. A brother named Chris said to me that, and from either Lancaster prison or Ironwood, he said, Common, imagine being trapped in one act for the rest of your life. One act for the rest of your life. And I thought about that and I was like, I wouldn't, if I got trapped in my worst act for the rest of my life and that's all I was deemed as is that person, I wouldn't be pursuing the things that I'm doing now. I wouldn't be able to live a happy, a beautiful life, to be able to spread love. So it's essential for us to go into visit our loved ones, show them love, write letters. Um, they just need to, they just need to be acknowledged and heard. Like that's it, and recognized and cared for.
You know, we are living in interesting times, and that's an understatement. We have protests like we have never seen on top of a pandemic, inside an economic disaster, with an upcoming election. And prison reform is touched upon by all of those things, particularly COVID-19 and the novel coronavirus. 100,000 people have been released from prison since the pandemic hit. And that raises questions about our prison system and whether we're sending too many people for light offenses to federal prisons. Is there a moment in what we're learning about how people are being released because of COVID that will allow us to look at prison reform in a slightly different way? And I guess the second question is the reckoning that we're all seeing right now. Do you think that this feels like a real movement, or or do you worry that it might be fleeting and that it might be more of a moment instead of a?
Well, I think this moment of seeing people being released from prison, and you know crime hasn't jumped up. The world hasn't turned around anymore because people who were incarcerated got out. Um, it lets you know that there are hundreds of thousands of human beings that deserve to be back in society. And our criminal justice system, the prison system, has to be that thorough enough to assess and that caring enough to assess and say, these individuals have committed crimes, they've served their time, they deserve to be back in society, and we can get them back into society in a healthy way, because throughout their prison term, they've been treated well, they've been treated like human beings, they've actually grown, and now can come back into society. We have programs like ARC that can help them transition to live a good whole life. So this, I mean, when you think about the fact that it's people like locked up doing heavy years for marijuana, which is now, a legal thing that, people are investing in. And I've met people who didn't touch a weapon, was serving 6 life sentences, didn't touch a weapon. At a certain point, like, you have to, like, it has to be a cognitive, like, process that where you see individuals improve themselves, and now they can come back to society. So that reckoning, we see an example of this right now. We see an example of it. And this moment, of America really having to deal with itself and deal with the ills that is done to Black people, is really letting us see that this prison system is one of the biggest failures that has happened to Black and brown people especially. But I just look at it too as poor people. And that being said, it's people that are incarcerated now just because they didn't have the money to get a good attorney. It's people that are incarcerated because of the environments that they grew up in and didn't, like, they had no outlets. I've met an individual that was sexually abused. He was able to trace that sexual abuse into why he got into violence. He got into violence and didn't recognize until prison that he didn't know how to deal with the sexual abuse he had as a 5-year-old. These are things that, like, when I use the word healing, that's what I'm talking about. And I feel that our country, we're not going to stop. I don't think that people are just at this moment and like, okay, as soon as we can go to the new way of living, we're going to forget what's happening. You can't forget. You can't forget. And so many things are already moving. There's organizations that have already been at this work that are now being highlighted in strong ways, and they will continue to work. And I believe so many more people are feeling responsible. White people that have called me and said, what can I do? That's not going to stop. Like, that's the Black people who've continuously been out there, the Latino people and the Asian people who have been out supporting, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. I truly believe this has been one of the greatest turning points in our country. And as heavy as it's been inspirational to see so many people coming together for humanity, for Black people understanding that yes, this race of people are valuable to society, and we do obviously matter. But not only do we matter, but we benefit society by having equality and by having opportunities. So this prison system is a shining light right now on that situation. And I think that we are going to get past it because so many people see the injustice that is happening with prison systems and obviously with the police departments.
I could talk to you all day, but unfortunately, this has to be my last question. In times of tumult, the arts help us cope. They help us get through these moments, but they also provide a window years from now that'll help us understand this. We saw that in the art, the music, the film, the dance that came out of the 1970s. We saw it in the Harlem Renaissance that followed the Great Depression and the war. Right now, as an artist, and we should note you have run, as I noted at the beginning, a Grammy, an Academy Award, and an Emmy. There are only a few people who are EGOTs, who I think it's 15, who have, those three
Yeah,
things plus the Tony. So your group is
yeah.
called Imagine Justice. That sounds like that might be a Broadway play also. So I'm wondering if you have that in your future, if you're like spinning bars right now, thinking about the Broadway production when the lights come back on Broadway that you might be able to serve up to the world.
You know, Michelle, what's so ironic about the talk we have and you bringing that up is I actually was slated to do a play um, in the fall before the pandemic happened, which was dealing with those who were formerly incarcerated, and
Wait,
it's
this
a
coming
beautiful.
fall?
Yes, I mean it's not going to happen now, obviously, because of Broadway, but we will do it at some point. I'm an actor in the play. It's a beautiful play, and I'm really looking forward to it. And that being said, art storytelling has a way to touch people's hearts in ways that that the news doesn't. That certain just talks even sometimes don't, but I feel like the art is really a storytelling is a way to where a person can receive like entertainment on certain levels, transformation on certain levels, and inspiration, and healing. And I'm a true believer in the art is something that provides all those things. I went into to at least 10 prisons in the state of California and performed. And I had individuals come up. First of all, the men and women who helped, they the men like helped on the production of setting up our stages. We did a full-on concert. Like it was, as Scott says, like it was Coachella. It was just like it just and the way the music brought light out of all the individuals who were incarcerated. I had people come up to me who said, "I never been to a concert before. Thank you." I had people come up and say, "Man, I forgot I was in prison for this hour and 20 minutes." And it just let me know the power of art and what it can do to actually bring us all together, what it can do to heal us, what it can do to inform us. I learned so much uh, through hip hop culture, through jazz music, through storytelling and films and reading great literature. I learned so much about myself, other cultures, other people through art. And I really feel like the artists we're gonna have to really live by the mantra of Nina Simone and reflect the times right now and be very informative and still make it creative and fresh so people can enjoy it. And at the same token, spread that love like that music, film, theater, visual arts, photography. When you put love into it transforms into all individuals who witness it. And no matter what color, what party you from, or what part of the world you're in, you still feel that love. So that's where art will be. Like I feel like it's one of the leading components towards this change, and I've seen it happen.
It's been so good to talk to you. Thank you for all the work you do with Imagine Justice. Thank you for the light you bring into the world. And whenever Broadway reopens, I'll be in the audience and I'm looking forward to seeing that play. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Appreciate you. Love.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have in this segment. I want to thank Common for joining me, but I want you to stay tuned because we also have coming up, we have Scott Budnick, who is who's with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and Jarrett Harper, who's a campaign ambassador for Represent Justice. And here's a quick clip to introduce our next segment. Stay with us.
They are not designed to handle a COVID outbreak. They're not even designed to deliver adequate medical care. I don't see how we think they're designed to handle an outbreak.
So we're in a crisis. We are in a crisis mode. Mass incarceration was a public health crisis before COVID-19, but this pandemic has pushed it past the breaking point.
Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm Michele Norris. I'm a columnist with the Washington Post. I want to welcome our next guest. That's Scott Budnick. and Jarrett Harper. Scott, you're a film producer. You produced Just Mercy, the Hangover films, but you're here to talk to us today about the work that you're doing on anti-recidivism. We're also joined by Jarrett Harper. Thanks to both of you for being with us. I want to hear more about the nuts and bolts of prison reform, but your story, your collective story is interesting. So let's begin there. Scott, how did you meet Jarrett? How did the two of you start working together?
Well, I ended up we made a film called Old School back towards the beginning of my career, and someone brought me into a juvenile hall in Los Angeles, and I sat with a group of kids, juvenile hall that Common has since come into and spent a lot of time at, and sat with a bunch of children, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old that were facing life sentences and life without parole. In fact, the first young man I was sitting next to, I said, "How was your week?" And he said, "It was a really bad week. I just got sentenced to 300 years to life in prison." And that shocked my conscience. And when I asked him to elaborate, he said, "I was standing next to my friend who shot the victim in the rear end. The victim was in and out of the hospital in a day. And for standing next to the person with the gun, I ended up getting a 300 to life sentence." And he was 15 years old, and I was looking at a child. And I just realized as I went around the table and heard from those kids, it was hurt people, hurt people. These were all young people who were victims of everything you could ever imagine before they ever decided to victimize someone. And I knew what I was like as a kid, and that I caught a lot of breaks, and that kids have the ability to change and transform. And I didn't think we lived in a country where our values would allow us to send a kid to die in prison. There's no other country in the world that would do it. So I jumped into this and ended up going into jails and prisons and juvenile halls while I was a movie producer, and hired a bunch of folks out of jails, prisons, and juvenile halls on The Hangover, and ended up going to Lancaster Prison, which is our only prison in Los Angeles County, and ended up doing a lot of work there where I met Jarrett Harper's, and Jarrett's story just blew my mind, and we got to know each other. And now I call him my brother. I love him like family, but that's how it all began.
And Jarrett, you spent 20 years behind bars. And during that time, you didn't think you were going to see the other side of this. And yet you spent so much time working with other people that you knew were going to get out, creating education programs, creating programs to help prepare them for life outside. Did that help keep you going in some way, knowing that you were helping other people on their journey?
Absolutely. I mean, as Common said, not only do you have people who are wrongly convicted and sentenced to disproportionate sentences, but you also have guilty people. And I was one of those people that was guilty. I was given a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, plus 10 years when I was a child. That sentence literally ripped everything out of me. I lost every bit of hope, but I longed for a second chance. After I went to my self-help programs, and after I connected to my higher power, which was God, I knew that I had to do something more. And part of that more was assisting other people. Although I was never going to be allowed back into society, I knew that my purpose was to assist people who were going to re-enter society. Once I began to do that, although I was incarcerated, it provided me with so much value, and it provided me with hope. Not necessarily when it came to getting out, but the hope that I can actually be more than my worst act. So actually assisting people was my way of proving myself wrong and proving society wrong.
Your story sounds almost like a script from a film that Scott would produce. The DA who prosecuted your case said that you were lucky, that's the word I guess he used, that you were not 18 because you would have been eligible for the death penalty. You've just celebrated, I understand, 1 year of freedom, is that correct? And you're still right, and you're right now, you say that more than anything, you want to start a family, but you plan on always looking back over your shoulder to help those that are still behind bars. That's still very important to you, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, when I look at the crisis that we're in right now. A little over a year ago, I escaped COVID-19 um, in the sense of becoming infected while in prison. That was always my worst fear, dying inside of a human-made cage. Knowing where I came from, knowing what those guys are experiencing, there's no way to social distance at all. You know, I mean, spaces are confined. There's no way to possibly social distance. It's a community-based environment. You share a water faucet, you share the shower, you share the phones. There's 200 people inside of our buildings inside of California prison systems, and everyone has to use the same phone to call their families. And right now, everyone needs, you know, exactly what Common says. You need that support, right? You want to know that your family's doing well, but you also need to hear that support because they're scared, you know. So for me, actually looking over my shoulder and reaching back to pull my brothers and my sisters up, and even juveniles who are in detention centers, you know, looking at them and knowing that it's the right thing to do, right? To actually walk away and act as though they don't matter. It's just outright wrong, especially during a pandemic. So looking over my shoulder for me is a must because that's where my friends, that's where my family is at. I know more guys in prison than I actually know out here. I have more friends inside of prison who have changed their life, who have earned a second chance, but they haven't been allowed the opportunity to present themselves, you know, in a way that would show society that they're no longer a threat to society. So looking over my shoulder is it's just one of those things that I don't have any other choice. Right? That's where I come from.
Let's spend a minute talking about the impact of COVID on prisons. The Marshall Project, working with the Associated Press, found that 100,000 people have been released, and it ranges. In Virginia, I think it was something like 8%. In Rhode Island, it's 32%. 57,000 people are thought to have been infected by COVID. That number also attributed to work done by the Marshall Project. What needs to be done for a population that is vulnerable, where, as you say, social distancing is impossible? The reaction varies from state to state. What should the government be doing, Scott, right now? And is there anything that individuals can be doing? If you pay attention on social media, there are often campaigns to send things like disinfecting wipes to people who are behind bars, to try to provide things that right now the prison system seems to be unable to provide. What needs to be done?
Well, let's also not forget it is absolutely impossible to social distance in there. If you're in a dorm, just getting off your bed, you're on top of someone else next to you, you're next to someone, and to walk down an aisle in between the bunks, you're having to turn your body. So social distancing is out. You also have to realize that when this happened, and rightfully I understand it, all of these corrections departments stopped visiting, so no one sees their family anymore. They stopped all volunteers, so any of the positivity that was coming in there gone. All religious services. If you are a person of faith, you cannot go to church anymore. You don't see the religious volunteers, pastors, priests, etc. Stopped college, stopped education. So you're now sitting in a cell or in a dorm, watching the TV, seeing the news every night, and absolutely terrified that your family members may not make it, that they may die while you're sitting in prison, that you may get it and you may die without being able to say goodbye. So first off, I got to give another shout out to my brother Common. I told him this and he said, let's do something. So we started a Hope and Inspiration series where we do these conversations just like we're doing today, and we bring on special guests, and it gets beamed into prisons where over 600,000 people get to watch in their cells or in their dorms and get hope and get inspiration and see that there's so many people out there that care about them and know that we're going to get through this. Obviously looking at releasing folks who are not a danger to the community. So many people that are in prison are there because we're not scared of them, but we're just mad at them. They pose no danger, but there's just people that are mad at them. And so looking at those that don't pose a danger, just like Jarrett, right? Jarrett can tell you there are 200 guys on his yard right now that are serving life sentences for crimes they committed as juveniles and have been in for 30, 40 years in prison. Every one of them could go home. And in California, they have a less than 1% chance of ever coming back. I've never seen a lifer that came in as a juvenile or young adult ever get released and come back to prison in my 20 years of doing this. Not one. They're the lowest recidivating population. And even when I tell the story about David, who got 300 years to life for standing next to someone, we were actually able to pass bills in California that Governor Brown and Governor Newsom signed to end sending young people to prison for life, and to give them the chance of release when they've shown transformation, change, et cetera. And it's affected 26,000 people in our prison system that were sentenced to die in prison as young people. And I think other states adopting that, and us as a public saying, yes, let's look at the nonviolent, those are the easy ones. But there are also people that have been in there like Jarrett for 2 decades, 3 decades, that are completely changed and transformed people that committed their crime at a young age because it was hurt people, because they were traumatized, because they were in the foster care system, or they've been a victim of physical or sexual abuse. Not excusing it, but when is enough enough? And also, we've been doing so much around Just Mercy in our campaign, Represent Justice. So anyone that's watching that wants to get involved, if they go on to representjustice.org, we have sent in tens of thousands of masks. We've given out millions of dollars to organizations. They can get involved. They can start volunteering. And if you haven't seen Just Mercy, see it, because the work of Brian Stevenson and EJI is just so deep and so impactful. And I think that movie also gives you a roadmap of how to get proximate and how to get involved.
You know, when people right now are actually curious in ways that I have not seen, they are hungry for information, even about things that they might not agree with. People who perhaps don't agree with the fight to end police brutality are interested in learning more about it. So for people who are trying to understand the nuts and bolts of prison reform, whether you're talking about halting the transfer of juvenile offenders into adult prisons, or improving the conditions behind bars, or creating a better system for rehabilitation, what are the things, or what are the other, if you were to create a quick syllabus, just 1 or 2 things beyond seeing Just Mercy that you think people need to do or read or go to better understand this issue, where would you lead them?
I think Common mentioning the new Jim Crow is huge. The thing is, what I've saw, we've been doing a lot of work in Oklahoma recently, and obviously a place that is very different politics than California. But I've seen the folks in Oklahoma, deeply evangelical folks of faith, get hugely involved in this issue and start doing prison ministry. I've seen people, at the very least, sign a petition to look at a case of someone that's innocent on death row, like Julius Jones in Oklahoma. I've seen people ask to bring Just Mercy, the book or the film, to their book club or to their church group, or to use it in their curriculum in their high school or their college class. I've seen colorofchange.org, do incredible work around educating people on the importance of prosecutors and the decisions that prosecutors have, whether to rehabilitate someone or punish them in a draconian way that's out of step with the rest of the world. And Color of Change does incredible work. Obviously, the work that Brian Stevenson and EJI are doing, EJI.org, in terms of educating people to have to confront things that are uncomfortable for us. Like, I had a conversation with my family in Atlanta about how we as a country have never fully confronted our past of slavery, and the fact that we had human beings that were slaved, that were whipped, which is just an atrocious thought that we did that. But when Brian talks about Germany looking at the Holocaust and saying never again, I think it's important for us to, these are uncomfortable. It's easy to want to forget our past, but I think the work that Brian Stevenson and EJI does to educate folks, to not blame folks and say this is your fault, but to say, open your mind, come in and understand this. I think this is great work. And I've seen with my family that is in Atlanta and deep in Georgia, I've seen post George Floyd, them start having conversations of watching CNN or reading the Washington Post or watching other news networks and understanding for the first time, wow, sometimes it's just so hard to be Black. I never quite got that. Or raising a Black child. To hear my own family, my white family from the South say that, and now say it right now for the first time after George Floyd, I think we're moving in the right direction.
I want to bring in a question from one of our listeners. Her name is Chris, or actually, I don't know if it's a man or a woman. It's Chris O'Neill. I shouldn't assume that it's a man or a woman. It's Chris O'Neill, who was watching from Texas and wants to know what are the 3 most important needs of someone who's just been released from prison. Jarrett, of course, this is a question for you, who just celebrated your 1-year anniversary. What are the needs of people who are integrating back into society?
Housing, right? Housing is a huge issue for returning citizens. Within the first 72 hours, if a person does not have an actual safe residence to actually call their home, or a place just to reside, there's almost a 3 to 4 times more likelihood that you will recidivate. Right? There also needs to be a jump, but not necessarily a jump, but an increase in the funds that are given to a person who's being released. When I was released a little over a year ago, I was given $200. That $200 after 20 years was for me to get a license, get a social security card, a birth certificate. After that, I pretty much didn't have any more money. So ensuring that returning citizens do have enough money to actually do the things they need to actually safely and positively reintegrate back into society. Something else that I really believe we need to actually ban the box. When a person gets out of prison, when I say ban the box, it's a lot of companies actually exclude people who have records. Right? It's known when you're in prison, when you get out, you have a record. You know you have to go into some of the worst jobs possible. Even though you may have a skill, you've rehabilitated yourself, you're still not in a fair place when it comes to the workforce. So ensuring that people who are returning actually have a fair chance when it comes to employment, housing, and enough income to actually reintegrate back into society. Those are the things that returning citizens need.
Jerry, if you could just explain ban the box, that means the little box that you have to check if you're applying for a job, applying for housing,
Yes.
any kind of application you have to fill out. Is that correct?
Yes. And even with that box, so when it comes to employment, that's one of the questions that's usually posed. Have you ever committed a crime or a felony? That, I mean, it excludes so many people. Right out here in California, we have well over 100,000 people inside of our prison. When those people get out of prison, it's less likely that they will get a job that's going to be able to support them and their family. Right? So banning that box is something that's really needed. There's so many supportive services that a person who went to prison are just not eligible for because of that record. Once a person pays their debt to society, right, I think that we as a society, we need to actually invite them back into our society and give them a fair chance.
It has been so wonderful to talk to both of you. I hope this is just the beginning of a conversation that we will continue over time, because the issue is just that important. Scott Budnick, Jarrett Harper, thanks to both of you for being with us.
Thanks, Michelle. Love you, Jarrett.
Love you, bro.
Best to both of you. So thank you so much to our audience for watching today. Tomorrow, I hope you will be back with Washington Live for a back-to-back series of interviews with restaurateur Wolfgang Puck, followed by chef and TV host Marcus Samuelson. They're both going to be discussing the impact of COVID-19 and the social justice movements on the restaurant industry. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michele Norris, columnist with the Washington Post. This is Washington Post Live. Be well.